I have to admit this one surprises me a little because I feel like I talk about this team a lot. But here's a look at the results so far. Of course, Ohio State, the overwhelming favorite. We did that video a couple hours ago. Up now, the Florida Gators. You can continue to go back to that video called Your Team Sucks and click the thumbs up on whatever teams you want to see me talk about. And we'll do a few more of these. But with this Florida video, I'm going to start with the person that left that comment. Here's the comment again. This Octavian. Now, Octavian, I like Octavian. He's been around a long time, and I hope people have figured out by now that I don't generally call people out that I don't like. People I don't like, I tend to ignore, so if I talk a lot of shit about you, I probably like you at least a little. And Octavian, I'd be lying if I didn't say I liked you at least a little. But my God, son, get a hold of yourself. This guy called into the call-in show a few days ago and told me that Florida's going 10-2. Now, first of all, pick yourself back up off the floor. I know you fell out of your chair laughing when I said that. But yes, he called in and said with a straight face that Florida's going 10-2 and winning the East. Get this, though. Who do you think those two losses are? Who does he think Florida's losing to if they go 10-2? Georgia? Nope, they're beating Georgia. Florida State? No, beating Florida State. LSU? Nope, he says they're beating LSU. What about Tennessee? Nope, Octavian says they're beating Tennessee. Octavian called in and said Florida's going 10-2 with losses to South Carolina and Arkansas. Now, I hear a lot of crazy predictions, and to be honest with you, I make a few myself. But that's ridiculous, Octavian. 10-2 with losses to South Carolina and Arkansas. But anyway, Florida's funny for a whole plethora of reasons. Of course, they're an absolute terrible team right now. They're in horrible shape. They're coming off back-to-back losing seasons for the first time in 50 years. 50 years? Wow. Just bad times to be a Florida Gator. And look, like I said, I'm a little surprised y'all picked Florida because I've made a couple of videos about them over the last month or so. But it really shouldn't be a surprise that Florida's bad. They've been bad for about 90% of their history. If you take out the run they had from, what was it, around 1990, I guess, 1991 to 2008, a 17 or 18 year period. They won a bunch of SEC titles during that 17-year period, and they won 3 national titles. And that's an amazing run. That was a great 17-year stretch for Florida from around 1991 to 2008. The problem is, that's a 17-year period. They've been in the SEC for 90 years. 90. They've never even won the SEC outside of that 17-year period. They've been in the SEC since the 30s. They didn't win the SEC in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, or the 80s. Is that 6 decades it took them to win their first SEC title? And people are going to say, oh, nobody cares. It was easy to win back then. Well, if it was so easy, then how come Florida never did it? Not a single time until the 90s. 91 to 2008, you went on a pretty good run like I mentioned. And then from 2009 till today, again, 0 SEC titles. This Florida team that we're watching right now, this Florida program that we are seeing, is not some kind of anomaly. We shouldn't be scratching our heads trying to figure out why is Florida so bad right now. It's the opposite. We should be scratching our heads and trying to figure out how the hell did we let Florida win that much from 1991 to 2008? That's embarrassing for everyone else in the SEC, including me and the Georgia Bulldogs. You know how bad the conference has to be to where Florida is dominating it for a 17-year period? And that's pretty much what happened from 1991 to 2008. That's absolutely horrible. As far as Florida goes right now, of course, Sunbelt Billy has no idea what he's doing. He's completely clueless. He started like 1-3 in the SEC last year, the worst start Florida has had in a season in the SEC in 40 years. I already mentioned back-to-back losing season for Florida. Now, last year was Billy Napier's first year, so he only owns one of those losing seasons. But look at Florida's schedule for this year and try to find me 6 wins. And I'm being dead serious. I'm not trolling. This guy just hates Florida. The Vegas win total for Florida is 5.5. Does Vegas just hate Florida? Actually, maybe Vegas does hate Florida. Because according to Florida fans, that's what it is. Everybody's just out to get Florida. Oh, everybody just hates Florida. We're going to talk about this in a second. They're all up in arms now. Florida fans are, because of some recruiting ratings. There's some players got, but anyway. So, but look at his schedule and try to find me 6 wins. So they're likely on their way to their third straight losing season. And the bad news is next year's going to be even worse. Next year's schedule for Florida is absolutely, it's brutal. They play Miami, Florida State, and Central Florida in the non-con. Florida could be 0-3 against Florida teams. They could lose to Florida State, Miami, and Central Florida next season. Never mind their SEC schedule of Georgia, Tennessee, LSU. Are they playing Texas or Oklahoma? Doesn't matter. Whoever it is, they'll lose. Florida's probably going to only win 3 or 4 games next season. They're probably going 5-7 this season. Currently sitting on 2 straight losing. They're looking at 4 straight losing seasons. Florida is, and they want to talk about the recruiting class. And look, I'll be the first to admit, I say this over and over again because it's true. Recruiting is the single most important aspect in all of college football, period, bar none. And whatever is second is a distant second, period. You've got to recruit, but not for 1 year, son. Florida fans laughed and mocked Texas A&M for bragging about having one recruiting class. Well, that's all you have. I mean, the recruiting class you have for 2023 right now looks pretty good, but it's July, okay? We'll see what it looks like in December. Now, to be fair, I expect Florida to finish with probably a top 5 class, 6 or 7 at the worst, and that's going to be a good class. That's going to put them about 4th best in the SEC, but still, 6th or 7th overall is going to be pretty good, okay? Now, do that 4 years in a row, and you'll have a legitimate roster. But 1 year really means nothing. And beyond that, this year's recruiting class means freshmen in 2024. None of those players are helping you next year. They're definitely not helping you this year. They're not on your team this year. So you're still, you could sign the number 1 class this year, the best class in the history of history. You're still going to have a losing record this season and next season. This recruiting class might help you some in 2025 if it sticks around till then. But what are the Florida fans upset about? Are they mad that Billy Napier in his first year had a losing season? No. Are they mad that they're coming off back-to-back losing seasons for the first time in 50 years? No. Are they mad that they've been owned and blown out by their rival 4 out of the last 5 years? No, they're not. Are they mad they can't win their division? No, they're not. Are they mad they haven't won the SEC in 15 fucking years? No, they're not. Are they mad the entire run of the 4-year playoff system is going to come and go without them ever making a playoff? No, they're not mad about that. Are they mad that they got humiliated in the postseason last year by a middle-of-the-pack Pac-12 team? No, they're not mad about that. Are they mad that they lost to Tennessee last year for the first time since Octavian was in diapers? No, they're not mad about that. What are they mad about? On 3, which no one gives a fuck about, by the way. On 3, the new kid on the block, 24/7s and rivals. Look, I don't want to get into the habit of comparing recruiting services. I've said this before. I'm no recruiting expert. I check recruiting rankings a couple of times a month, and I go from there. But no one's taking On 3 serious to start with. It's all about 24/7 to me. I think they're the best, but rivals, whatever you want to use is fine. On 3 is a complete joke anyway. But I guess there were some players, I guess, that have been committed to Florida, and On 3 updated their current player rankings, and a couple of the players that were committed to Florida dropped in the rankings, which is extremely common, by the way. This happens all the time. These rankings are updated constantly over the course of a recruiting cycle, and some players move higher in the rankings, some players move lower in the rankings. Now, notice the Florida man didn't point out any of the Florida players that actually improved in the On 3 rankings. No, they're just bitching and moaning and crying like a couple of 9-year-old girls who got stood up at the sock hop because On 3 dropped a couple of Florida recruits in their player ratings. I mean, shit, Dylan Raiola was the number 1 player in the country. He commits to Georgia. Now he's not the number 1 player in the country. They got something against Georgia, too? I'm just asking for a friend. I don't know. Or could it be that these ratings just fluctuate over time? Florida man is having a hard time wrapping their head around the idea that a player's rating can change when games aren't being played. Hey, how dumb are you on a scale of 1 to fucking retarded? There are all kinds of things that can be evaluated by a player in the part of the year where games aren't being played, you fucking idiot. These ratings don't just come from a handful of Friday nights over a kid's 4-year high school career, you idiot. Maybe y'all ought to go back to just not paying attention at all to recruiting. That's probably the best thing you could do. You know what it is? Florida's sucked in recruiting for so bad now that you see a couple of headlines in June. Oh, Florida's putting together a pretty good class. You go, you look it up, you see you're ranked in the top 5 of these classes. All of a sudden in your mind, you're some kind of fucking recruiting expert. And then in July, you hear that a couple of players dropped in the ratings. And all of a sudden there's some mass giant fucking conspiracy where everybody's out to get Florida. What the fuck would anybody be out to get Florida for? Florida's doing a good enough job of its own, of burying its own program. Nobody at On3 needs to have some sort of secret hidden agenda to try to destroy the Florida program. It's already being destroyed from the inside out. Florida's destroying it itself. Scott Strickland might be the worst athletic director in the SEC. Florida fans can't stand this guy. Doesn't know what he's doing. Look at the people he's hired, for Christ's sake. It's a who's who of don't know what they doing. I didn't mean to get this wrangled and riled up. Y'all get mad about a player going up or down in the in recruiting ratings in fucking July. Let me explain something to you, dillhole. Let me explain this to you. Take any player, take any high school player, okay? And let's use, we're not going to do a star system for this. We're going to do a 1 through 10, and just stick with me here. Let's say that Florida is scouting player A, okay? And according to Florida's own scouting department and recruiting department, they rate player A 7 out of 10, okay? Now, let's say that On3 or 24/7 or anyone else for that matter has this player rated as a 5-star. So some recruiting services, which most schools don't even pay attention to, by the way. Kirby definitely doesn't. He talks about it all the time, how little he cares about a player's rating. But let's just say that this player that Florida has evaluated and is assigned a grade of 7 out of 10 to suddenly gets rated by 24/7 and they say he's a 5-star or On3 or whoever else, okay? Now, that shouldn't change Florida's mind about that player one bit. Florida then shouldn't try to recruit that player harder, should they? No. You've scouted this player. You've recruited this player. You've assigned your own internal rating to this player. He's a 7 out of 10 according to you, Florida, right? So then 3 months later, if On3 or 24/7 or whoever else updates their ratings and they reclassify that player from a 5-star to a 4-star, does that mean, according to you, do you think he got worse? No, he's the same player he was, right? According to Florida. A player is not going to get better because 24/7 increases his rating, and a player is not going to get worse because 24/7 decreases his rating. The player is going to be who the player is going to be, regardless of what rating 24/7 or On3 or anybody else puts on him, or even what rating Florida puts on him internally. The player is going to be who he's going to be. The player's not going to become better or worse based off of that star rating. Now, it's a whole other argument about how accurate or not the star ratings are. That's a whole other debate and discussion that I'm not going to get into on this video because that's a 20-minute just recruiting video and whether or not stars matter, which here's a hint, they do. The more 4 and 5 stars you sign, the better chances you have of winning games. That's just reality. But the Florida man is just an idiot, running around crying. Look, and then they say, well, Lou, it does matter because if we have a guy that's let's say if we get a guy to commit and he's a 5-star, that helps us in recruiting because we can tell other commits we have a 5-star recruited. And then if 24/7 drops him into a 4-star, that hurts us because we can't then tell the other recruits that we had a 5-star committed. Even if that's true, which how many recruits out there are falling into this category? I don't know, but even if that's true, that's what you're worried about? That's what you're worried about? How about the fact that you can't win any fucking games? Don't you think recruits care more about that? Don't you think recruits care more about the fact that you've had back-to-back losing seasons than they do about whether or not DJ Lagway is the 8th or 4th best player or whatever the fuck it is you dummies are crying about? Jesus, for fuck's sake, man. Get a hold of yourselves.